All right, we're going to spend a little time talking about acceleration mechanics. You're basically the body positioning and foot placement and mechanics involved in trying to accelerate. A lot has been talked about top end mechanics, so you'll see coaches talking about how to do your arm swing and getting your knees up, but a lot of times we don't really see people teaching kids or athletes how to accelerate, and it's probably more important than top end mechanics. So we spend a lot of time teaching people how to accelerate, and we generally will go through a progression that works for us. And it's not perfect, but it really works for us, and then there's lots of different ways and different variations we can use depending on how well or not well the athletes are picking it up. So what we usually start off with is trying to explain to the athletes that when you're accelerating, you actually have to be leaning into it. So if this is your head, and here's your feet, and we're running that way, your whole body has to be leaning in the direction that you're going, and your feet have to be driving back in the opposite direction. In order to get that lean, your whole body has to be leaning instead of bending at your hips. And unfortunately, a cue that seems to be out there a lot with coaches is stay low when athletes are accelerating. And what we see a lot of times is athletes develop a bent hip position, so they're running with their chest down, but their legs are straight instead of actually in like a falling type position. So we'll get them in it by doing a tall and fall drill. But before we even get to that, we talk about the foot placement and where their foot is going to hit the ground and what part of their foot's going to hit the ground. So we'll tell athletes to stand with their whole foot on the ground and just rock forwards just enough so that the weight comes off of their heels. So now they're on the ball of their foot. They can even pull their toes up slightly so that they feel that they're on that meaty part of their foot. A lot of times I'll actually go up to a kid and pick the foot up and push on the part of their foot that we want them to be on. When they're on that meaty part of their foot, they should feel a little bit springy. They're not up on their tippy toes. That would be an incorrect foot placement. They want their heel to be just a teeny bit off the ground, just enough so they can slide a piece of paper underneath their heel. From there then, to get them to understand how to get their knee up and actually strike the ground, we'll teach them a drill that I came up with a couple years ago that we call foot poppers or an icebreaker. And all the drill is you stand on one foot, you bring your other foot up so your knee is about at 90 degrees, keep your knee tucked in and your toes up so your ankle's dorsiflexed. Your left knee then, or your support leg, is slightly bent. And we tell them if you drive your foot down through the ground with your toe up and this leg is bent, what's going to happen? Sometimes the kids don't even understand that they're going to then pop up in the air a little bit. And all we're really working on, and we can do another video about this later on, but all we're really working on is how to strike the ground through the ball of their foot with their ankle dorsiflexed so that they can use their ankle more like a spring rather than having them land with their toe pointed and it kind of then has to decelerate the whole time. So we'll have kids stand on one foot, and just to briefly go through it, they learn how to strike the ground with a dorsiflexed ankle and get that ankle to be a little bit more rigid. We'll get them to do a few reps on each side just so they get it. Now that is not a drill that you would have a kid do like 100 reps of. They can get hurt. So it's more of something that we get them to learn how to strike the ground. From there, we go into a tall and fall drill. So we'll have them stand up nice and tall, we'll get them back into this position, and now we'll have them fall forward, and just as they feel like they need to put their foot out because they're going to fall, they're going to drive that foot down into the ground slightly back behind them. It takes a little bit of time for an athlete to understand where to put the foot. A lot of kids want to put it out too far, and a lot of kids want to put it too far back. It's really going to be kind of underneath or slightly behind their center of gravity, but that feels really awkward for a lot of kids. So you have to give them time to get used to it. The other thing that you'll see a lot is if their knee is up at about 90 degrees, as they fall forward, their knee should actually come up. So we'll teach the kids that as they fall forward, they actually have to lift their knee up before they drive it down. And we'll start off with just one strike. So all they're doing is standing here like this, they lean forward, knee up, drive it down one time. We'll have them do it over and over and over again because most kids aren't going to do it perfectly the first time. You'll see them hit out in front of them, you'll see them barely tap the ground, they'll do it with their toes pointed, they'll go too far behind them. So you're going to have to watch and do a lot of corrections with them depending on what they're doing. After that, we say, okay, now we're going to add a second step. And we explain the second step is going to be exactly like the first step. Except you got to get your knee up quick now because it's not going to be starting in this position. So all they do from here is they start with their knee up, they fall forward, pull their knee up, 1, 2, and then they stop. And then they would probably do it again. Now, you can see that I was kind of exaggerating the steps. They're really trying to cover some distance, which is kind of what we want to do when we're teaching kids how to accelerate, so they can really cover some ground when they're trying to move, rather than taking little dinky steps. Usually when we add the second step, the first step gets much better. Then after that, the next progression is to add 2 more steps, so they take 4 steps. Generally when we add 4 steps, the first 2 or 3 steps are pretty good, and then they start to decelerate after that. But at least we're making some progress, and they're understanding how to get a forward lean, how to drive backwards with their foot, how to keep their knees up much higher than most kids are used to, and how to keep that ankle rigid and deliver a blow back behind them. Something else that we'll talk to the kids about are the Flintstones. And I've used this in several talks at different clinics, where I'll ask people, have you ever watched the Flintstones before? And a lot of people say, yeah, even younger kids have seen the Flintstones before. And I'll ask them, when Fred Flintstone is driving his car and he wants to stop, what does he do? And almost everybody then takes their feet and they put it out in front of them, and they say, oh, he puts his feet out in front of him. And then we explain to the kids, so when your foot lands out in front of you, you're putting on the brakes. And all of a sudden the light goes on and they start thinking, oh yeah, so I can't have my foot land in front of me, especially when I'm accelerating. And we say, so when you're leaning forward, you got to get your knee up and drive your foot back behind you, because if you push behind you, you're going to go in the opposite direction. And a lot of times just that simple little cue or that little story or visual image will kind of get the kids to kind of understand what we're looking for. If that doesn't work, then a lot of times we'll bring them over to a wall, and we'll do just a couple wall drills to get them into that position. So we generally will take them about a yard away from a wall. It's going to depend on how tall the kid is. For me, about a yard's about right. You're going to lean forward with your body relatively straight from your feet all the way up to your shoulders. A lot of kids want to get into this position because it's a lot more comfortable to just rest here. They don't want their hips forward, but you need the hips forward when you're accelerating, so you got to get them in this position. From here, we have them bring 1 foot up, and it's almost like doing the foot popper drill that I just explained, except they're doing it 1 time, and then they switch, and then they switch, and then they switch. After they get used to holding that position just for a brief second, we can come over to them each time, and you'll see kids who will put their foot out, they won't get their knee up high enough, so they're down here. They'll do weird things with their body. So you can come up, and on each rep you can correct it. So it's kind of a useful way to stop them in between each one, so you can put them back in position. Then we'll have them push against the wall as hard as they can. Generally it's for like 3 to 5 seconds. So all it's going to be is they're starting up here, and we have them drive against the wall, trying to deliver force backwards, and we tell them you should actually feel the pressure in your hands. And if their hips are up in this position and their feet are going to start going backwards, and they're going to feel they don't have as much pressure in their hands. After a few reps of getting them used to getting in that lean position, getting pressure, and actually pushing back against the ground, then we can turn them right around, have them start either with the foot up position or just with their feet underneath them. They go into the falling drill, and they can go into an acceleration mechanics like first 4 steps type of drill. Oftentimes that drill against the wall will help them learn how to accelerate out of it. Once they start to get that, then we'll put them in a more athletic position, so they will be more in like a 2-point starting position with 1 foot out in front, 1 foot back behind, and then they kind of lean into it, get their knee up, and they can accelerate out of it, more like what you would be doing on the field. So I hope that really helps you if you're trying to teach kids how to accelerate, gives you some ideas. It's not necessarily the only way to do this, but it is a way that has really worked for me and for our staff, and we teach hundreds of kids how to accelerate and the proper mechanics involved every single year, and we've had some real success. So I hope that the things that we do are going to help you take this to other kids and help more kids learn how to accelerate. Thanks a lot.